Ooh.
Already? I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, really. I mean, I think the main thing is I want to just be somewhere where I can speak English. There's lots of things that I want to do, and I find that just not being able to speak the language means I'm really kind of like restricted with what I can do here, and like where I can get things or where I can go to do things and stuff like that. Yeah, I think the main thing is that I just want to be I want to be at home. I'm quite a home boy. I kind of grew up in the same house and in the country until I was 18. That's my vibe. Well, I'm looking for a studio at the moment. Well, the idea is to basically extend what I'm trying here at HBC, which is to have a kind of open studio. To have a studio that's like bigger than your average like one man in a box doing things studio, where I can have workshops, have jams, invite other artists around or bands and so on, and then work with them and just make it much more of a kind of open studio project. That's one of the main things I'm going to be doing there. Basically, I think in general what I'm working on at the moment is trying to kind of break down and demystify the whole like process of making music in an electronic way, because I think so far it's quite a kind of almost like dissociative kind of voodoo thing, So there's like there are the people dancing, and then there's this kind of like crazy guy on stage doing stuff, and you don't quite know what he's doing. When I was on tour with Imogen Heap, there was there's a real kind of like emphasis on crowd interaction, and because it was a very different audience, and I really had to like open myself up to kind of explain and be really clear what I was doing, and the reward that I got from that was massive, and so that's really inspired me. Yeah, I guess to just completely open up, really. So everything I'm doing now, I want to kind of make the music I'm writing, sort of try out lots of different ways of kind of making that a much less rigid structure, so people can kind of take parts and remix it, or have it making music more as an app, say, rather than a recording. I mean, there'll be recordings as well, but having something that people can play around with themselves and get involved with. There's loads of people I'd like to work with. I think it's probably more a matter of just lots of people. I think that the main thing is I just want to work with people, because I think that's actually what music is about. Music only really comes alive when it's heard by a number of different people and shared by people. So, and the process of listening and the process of making it, they're very kind of closely linked. And I want to do that with lots of people. So I mean, there's no one sort of particular that I have in mind. But I think once I move to London, I've got lots of friends there. Yeah, the live situation's cool. I guess it depends, because with this bigger studio space, it's going to be possible to do like really really small shows, very very intimate shows. I mean, that's in a way what these jam shops are going to be about. The workshops, kind of like gig things that I'm doing here at HBC. They're going to be very small, a combination between a small gig and a workshop, really. And so these kind of studio sessions can be, they could be a small audience of like 10 people, and I think that's as appealing as doing a show to like 1,000 people. There's more interaction. Well, I mean, I started using Reactor about 10 years ago now. I mean, I got into it through music, and I heard that there were these new kind of platforms that you could get where you could kind of make your own synth. And I was just like, wow, that sounds amazing. And then got into it very slowly. It took a long time to learn. I started getting deeper and deeper into it. I started actually kind of rewriting the very basic building blocks of the stuff that makes synths and samplers and plugins, and I realised that I had a lot of ideas of my own about machines that didn't exist and I wanted to exist. When I was like 15 at school, this is even before I'd even ever used a computer, I was like, yeah, I want to be able to chop up breaks with my fingers and stuff like that. I mean, I don't really know anything about electronics. There's a lot of maths actually involved in electronics. Ironically, in software, there's very little maths. It's very obvious what you can do. You just find some formula. Whereas with electronics, I don't know. I'm always how you work out resistance and capacitance and all these strange things. It's above my head. Ooh, perfect instrument. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is no perfect instrument. I think, for me, it's more instruments. They're just like pieces of music. It's kind of indicative. It comes from the time that it's made. It comes from the time it's written, and it's really deeply connected to society and the way things are at the time. And it's the same for software instruments. It's the same for plugins or synths or whatever. I mean, they're almost they're reflections of what's going on at the time. For example, there'll always be interest in what instruments we use to make sound like music over the years, because even really basic technology like the sort of the sine wave oscillators that the early kind of electronic music pioneers were using in the 50s, they're still, if you look at it in terms of software these days, it's just it's a sine wave with a knob, and I could program that in Reactor in 30 seconds. But the fact is, it's interesting because that's what they had then, that's what they worked with. So yeah, there is no perfect instrument. But there's things that I get very excited about, certain concepts at one time, and that's the way the human mind works. It gets very kind of drawn into a specific particular thing. It thinks this is the perfect thing. I've discovered it, the perfect tool. And but that's just brains being brains. That's what they do.
It's nonsense. This is the sound of nonsense.
I think I always wanted to make music my own way. But I suppose I felt that there wasn't really that much possibility maybe to just completely forge your own path. So I think I spent most of my early musical life being, I guess, more kind of adaptive and more kind of reflective, trying to reflect what was going on at the time in slightly weird, idiosyncratic ways. The first stuff that I made, or that I tried to make, was kind of housey stuff, because that was what I was into at the time. But I think it was more just a happy accident that when I was making house stuff, I was still at school, so I never met anybody who was connected to the music industry or record labels or whatever. And the first person I did meet who had a record label and did this kind of stuff and that I got involved with was John B, who was making drum and bass. So I kind of made a few drum and bass tracks, and that's how it happened. And then I ended up kind of in that scene doing that thing for a while. And then of course that kind of defined this new standpoint, which then led me on to doing weird drum and bass and Planet Mu, and then that led on to doing Warp stuff, and who knows where that's going to go next. But the lyrics in Listening Tree are, they're quite kind of anguished, tortured, and I think that's more a kind of period of my life where I was doing a lot of kind of, I guess, sorting things out, working out, maybe kind of expressing frustrations in a direct way that I'd never really expressed before. Even before listening to Tree, I was doing these very wild, very quite almost antagonistic kind of improvised live shows that were very kind of trashy, very lo-fi, very kind of like drunken, shouting, screaming, banging. I think in a way like the lyrics and listening Tree are actually like more about the things that I actually wanted to say when I was doing all this shouting, drinking and banging. You know, I felt that I was somehow this very sophisticated person that ought to kind of like articulate things in very sophisticated ways. And I was also a sort of angry and maybe slightly frustrated and bitter person. And so it was just like, it was the perfect cocktail to express these frustrations and to be damned eloquent while doing it as well. But yeah, I guess that's not so much of an interest, concern for me anymore. Obviously I do seem to change. I don't do a lot of standing still for some reason. I never quite know why, but I mean in terms of like genres and styles of music and tempos and stuff, I mean I've always seen them, I think, as more as like colours on a palette of paints. So it's not necessarily about painting a bunch of pictures in red or a bunch of pictures in blue. It's about painting pictures using all these different colours together. Oh, Family Galaxy?
Yeah.
I don't know, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks I think I spent on it, something like that. Bits that the tempo changes took ages to program. Because I mean, mathematically it's very simple. You just go like dun, 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 and then, you know, you just kind of mix the two together. And getting it so you like gradually hear these little beats coming in. It's just like, oh, that's a bit odd. Oh, hang on. And then that just took forever. And I think once I get to London, I'm going to be like, what? Why? Because it's so kind of easy. It's easy to get around. It's just very relaxed, and there's lots of stuff going on. Very, very kind of liberal in a lot of senses. I like it. I think ask me the same question after I've moved to London, and you'll probably get a much more in-depth answer. Berlin, I love you. I'm coming back.